Chapter 2, Voice to Men. Trying hard not to come across too thuggish in front of China's grandparents, I sat stiff-backed, pretending to be interested in what Ben, China's ostensibly aristocratic grandfather, who drove an RTD bus, was saying. You youngsters don't have any incentive, no drive. You're always looking for someone to put something in your hands. China, sighing loudly, nudged my leg and shot me a stare of, I've heard this a million times. She was eager to get back outside. We had only come indoors to retrieve China's coat, but had gotten caught in one of Dot, China's liberal grandmother, and Ben's discussions on youth. Now night had fallen. China's well-kept house sat smack in the middle of the block on 18th Street, our newest possession in our latest recruitment drive. I would imagine that our aggressive conquering of territory in those days, and still today, resembled Hitler's sweep through Europe. The apartment complex on the left end of the block off of Normandy Avenue became our base for this block. We have since referred to it as the Blue Apartments. We had lost the White Apartments on 65th Street to Bloods while I was a prisoner in youth camp. The battle, I'm told, was fierce, but not worth the price. Although we suffered no fatalities, our wounded and MIA list grew steadily. Besides this, the Brims, whom the battle was with, had called in reinforcements from the Rolling 20s Bloods. The White Apartments thus passed to the Red, and new ground was sought. 18th Street was just one street out of many that fell under our jurisdiction. The mechanics involved in taking a street or territory is not unlike any attempt, I would assume, on behalf of early Euro-American settlers. Sending a scout, have them meet with the natives, test their hostility level, military capabilities, needs, likes, and dislikes. Once a military presence is established, in come the citizens, in this case, gang members. Those who are not persuaded by our lofty presence will be persuaded by our military might. All who are of fighting age became conscript. The set expands, and so does our territory. Sometimes there is resistance, but most of the time our efforts are successful. China's younger brother was one of our first recruits from 18. Recommended by China and sponsored by me, he became Lil GC. Listen now, Cody, Ben continued in a deep baritone, pronouncing every syllable of every word. You have got to stop pussyfooting around with your life. We are quickly becoming a technological country, and computers are going to overtake manual labor. What that means is, a shot rang out, cutting Ben's monologue short. For an instant, I thought he himself had been hit. He was belly down on the floor. Another shot resounded, this time a shotgun blast. Jumping to my feet, I headed to the front door, opened it, and ran out onto the porch. My heart was pumping, but my adrenaline was urging me on. Looking first to the right, toward the Blue Apartments, and then to the left, in direction of Halldale, I spotted a burgundy Cutlass creeping down the street, a shotgun barrel in the passenger's hand, barely visible through the open window. Jumping the creeping Charlie plants on the porch, which grew in huge flower pots, I darted into the street. Pulling out my Chrome 25 automatic, recently put on the set by a new recruit, I began firing at the car. The car sped away. I kept firing at its rear as it turned left on the Normandy Avenue. I turned and bolted toward Halldale to assess the damage of that ride-by. Once I reached that corner, I heard Dee Dee, Butchie's sister, hollering. At first, I couldn't make out just what she was saying in the midst of all the escalating confusion. Civilians had come out of their homes, and homeboys were starting to gather in front of China's house. Then it dawned on me. Monster, here they come. They coming back. Damn, I was out of shells. No sooner than I turned around and take cover, thinking I'd be shot in the back, than a black and white police car hit the corner and all but ran into the shooter's car. The police pulled their weapons and ordered the occupants out of the car and face down in the street. We all gathered to identify our enemies, not to help the police, but for our own intelligence. There were 3 occupants, a .38 service revolver, a pump shotgun, sawed off at the barrel for a spraying effect, and sawed off at the stock for stealth and close combat. One shooter we knew, bank robber. The other 2 were obviously new recruits, probably putting in work for the first time. They were members of the Rolling 60s. My response went virtually unnoticed by the police, though I saw 2 holes in the passenger door. No one inside was hit. The shooters were taken away amid death threats and shouts of revenge. In the absence of the police, the car was promptly torn up and set ablaze. 10 minutes later, the impound came and scooped up the remains. On my trek by China's house on my way to the Blue Apartments, I encountered Dot and Ben on their front lawn. Cody, Dot started in on me first. You don't be running toward no gunfire. You run from it. You could have been killed. Yes, ma'am, I replied, grateful that they hadn't seen me firing on the car. Apparently, Dot had died for cover as well, joining Ben on the floor. I just thought that one of my friends had been hurt. Well, goddamn it, you're not Superman, boy, Ben said. You could not have possibly helped anyone in such a crisis. He pronounced crisis like Nixon, speaking on the energy crisis. You right, Ben. I lost my head. I replied to put one foot in front of the other, trying to exit the conversation and get to the blue apartments to mount a retaliation. "Where you going now?" Dot retorted with a genuine concern. "Ain't nothing but police out here." "To the apartments to check on my little brother," I lied and kept stepping. At the apartments, I was congratulated by the homies for a proper response, but I shook their flattery off. Shit, I wanted to know how, after I had alerted everyone to the enemy presence, the shooters were still able to make it off the block and come back around and shoot again. Heads dropped and gestures of dismay abounded. I looked on in disgust, thinking then that I was the only serious one in this. For the past 5 years, I had gotten up every morning and ironed my gear with thoughts of nothing else but doing propaganda for the set. I did this with all the zeal of a religious fanatic. Until I was 9 years old, we had lived on Hillcrest Drive in the Crenshaw district. This is a moderate middle-class neighborhood of block after block of sparse lawns, well-paved streets, and shady trees. My mother and stepfather had lived there since 1965. This neighborhood is now rolling 60s hood. Up until 1980, my mother still shopped at Buddha Market on Slauson Avenue, owned and operated by Orientals. In the summer of 1980, my mother asked me to accompany her to Buddha Market to shop. I refused with vigor, but my resistance was in vain. Mom didn't understand the complexity of our conflicts with other gangs. We were trying to kill each other. Up until then, she always took my spiel about our seriousness as a melodramatic exaggeration. I went to Buddha Market with her that day, and I weighed 2 pounds extra. I had a Browning 9mm with 14 shots. It was an unusually bright afternoon, and I recall feeling light and almost happy, content actually. Riding up Slauson past Crenshaw, I remember tensing and cringing as I read line after line of their graffiti on the walls and buildings. Amusing myself, I jokingly asked my mom to pull over so I can cross them out. In return, I got a "you damn fool" look. I noticed Mom's face cloud over with what I took to be utter helplessness. Ironically, I never gave stopping an inkling of a thought. This was my career, my calling, as church folks say, when someone does one thing real well. We traveled further west past West Boulevard, passing our old street. We both looked to the right briefly. Turning into Buddha Market's parking lot, I tightened my belt and gave my appearance a once-over. G down, short for gangsta down, or dressed in gang attire. In my gear, I had on blue khakis, white canvas all-stars, and a blue sweatshirt with my hair in braids. Brownies, brown garden gloves worn by gang members for fighting and shooting, hung halfway out of my right back pocket, and a blue flag hung out my left. Crips wear their left ears pierced and their flag on their left back pocket. Bloods are on the right. "Why don't you tuck in that old rag?" Mom blurted out while she gave herself a once-over. "It's not a rag, Mom, it's a flag," I said, wishing she for once would see my seriousness here. This was not some awkward stage of my life. This was a job to me, and I was employed full-time, putting in as much overtime as possible. Life from that vantage point seemed to be one big test of show and prove, pick and stick. Mom went through her usual greetings with the Orientals. They had known each other for years. I was on point. Not only was I in jeopardy, but with me I had Mom, who I was sure would try to talk an enemy to doing an about face. Fat fucking chance of that happening, I remember thinking. "You remember my son Cody, don't you?" "Yes, yes," I heard the Oriental woman saying amid other comments such as, "He's so big, so strong looking." After a few other exchanges, we started down an aisle. Canned goods, no interest here. "Mom, I'm going over to the cereal section," I said, and stepped quickly so she couldn't call me back. Turning the corner at the end of the aisle, I felt relieved to be alone, both for my safety and Mom's. I had every intention of going to the cereal section when I was distracted by a nice-looking young lady in produce. I made a beeline for the vegetables, and that's when I saw him. Damn! Enemy! Enemy! My adrenaline arm was going off. Sonic booms of heartbeat filled my ears. My throat got tight and my movements became automatic. We both reached for our waistbands simultaneously. The young lady had still not looked up from her inspection of the vegetables. Yet, the tranquil surroundings of an otherwise routine shopping trip were about to explode around her. I managed to drop and drew first. He was still drawing his weapon. Shit, had this been Beretta or Barnaby Jones, he would have thrown his hands up and surrendered. But not bothering to aim, I fired. Boom! Confusion and chaos swept the aisles like buckshots, screams following a quick succession. Damn, I missed. I fired again and hit him in the torso. The bullet knocked him back and his weapon discharged into the air. He had what sounded like a .22 caliber weapon. Folks now knew that 2 weapons were involved. One loud, my 9, and one not, his .22. I shot at him 3 more times to create an atmosphere of intensity, then turned and went in search of my mother. Since my last encounter with the ride-by shooters, where I had emptied my clip and was left vulnerable, I had learned to keep exit or safety shells. Running aimlessly about, frantically looking for Mom, I totally forgot I had the gun in my hand. I tucked it while jogging down a household appliance aisle. Not finding her there, I panicked. Remembering how I had been locked in the surplus store, I made my way then to the door, and there, among the other scared to death shoppers, I found Mom. She was grief-stricken, and her nerves in shambles. I grabbed her arm and ushered her away from the crowd. "Boy, was that you?" she said, hoping against hope that it wasn't. "Cody, what happened?" I made no attempt to explain. My sole intent was a timely escape. We drove in silence, block after block. We never even looked at each other. Back across Western Avenue, I began to breathe better as I finally reflected on what I had done. Fuck him, he was going to shoot me. I justified my shooting of him with self-defense. This thing was very dangerous. We all knew one another. It was like the CIA and the FBI going to war. There was no escaping one-sided. I thought for sure I'd be captured for this one. After all, the Oriental knew me, and folks had seen me with the strap. However, my arrest was not forthcoming. After getting out of camp in 1979, I met Tamu through my brother Kerwin and sister Candace, who all worked together at the 32nd Street Market. Tamu was a looker, tall and graceful, with a smile that shouted for attention. I was naturally attracted. However, she was older than I. In fact, we had nothing in common. She was tall, I was short. She had a job, I was an armed robber. She liked jazz, I liked funk. She had a car, I had a bicycle. She was drug and alcohol free. I smoked pot and PCP and drank beer. We clicked immediately. Today she'll say she didn't chase me, but in actuality she did. Once she and I began to go steady, she let me drop her off at work and keep the ride until she got off. Her shift was from 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. My attraction was not just physical, but to the fact that she was not afraid of my world. She was a civilian. To me, that was most appealing. She was not with me because of my reputation or clout, but for me as an individual. So when I went around her, I would present myself as Cody, without the monster persona. I'd take my shades off, tuck my flag, and not let her know when I was strapped. I also would douse myself with some of that expensive cologne Mom had bought me. Later, Tamu told me that I had been using too much, but that at the time, she didn't want to embarrass me, for she saw that I was trying to impress her. I would take Tamu up to the market and kiss her goodbye, drive to the corner, make sure she was inside the store and out of view, then reach for the glove compartment. I'd open it, pull out my flag, put on my murder ones, dark shades, also called lokes or locos, button the top button on my shirt, put my strap on my lap, and drive to the hood. I did so many ride-bys, drive-ups, drive-throughs, and chaseaways in her car that it's a wonder that she didn't either go to jail or get shot. I guess everyone assumed the car was stolen. Then, too, we left few witnesses. Tamu and I continued to date up until the time she told me she was pregnant. "Pregnant?" I asked in disbelief. "Yes, pregnant," she replied, matter-of-factly. I felt so young at the moment, just a baby myself. I panicked. Anything but a child. Things had gotten too serious, out of hand. I began to dodge Tamu. "Tell her I ain't here," I would tell family members when she called or came by. Mom, however, adored her, and they would sit for hours and talk. Often I'd come in from a hard day of campaigning, shotgun slung over my shoulder, and Tamu and Mom would be in the front room talking. I'd acknowledge them with a nod, then head on down the hall to my room and fall out in a dead sleep. I began not to care if she saw me as monster or not. I tried to push her away with the reality of who I was. She wasn't budging. Besides, Mom hated China for reasons I never knew. Perhaps because she saw that she and I were on the same path, whereas Tamu could be a positive influence in my life. I wasn't by any means ready to have a child, though. To me, that meant settling down, another obligation. I already had pledged my allegiance to the set, so I was in a rough spot. I had to pick either Tamu and my unborn child or my career in the set. This ate at me for several months. Sure, I liked Tamu, but not enough to forfeit my stature in the set. All I had worked so hard to build would be left to dangle in the wind, unfinished. Enemies, I thought, would overrun the hood if no one rallied the troops. Then, too, I felt an obligation to Tamu. She didn't get pregnant alone. And besides, the child would be a totally innocent party in the matter and deserved a fair chance. In those months of consternation, I shot more than a few civilians as my concentration was continually broken with the zigzag thoughts of my future. On July 28, 1980, I got a call from the hospital. "I'm in labor," I heard Tamu's voice squeak over the phone. "Are you coming here?" Yeah, sure, I'm coming," I responded as all my confusion and indecisiveness boiled up and over the brink of comprehension. I got my coat out of the closet in a complete daze. Not knowing exactly what to do, I reached under my pillow and took hold of my 9mm, checking the clip, 14 shots. I was past the days of half-loaded weapons. Shit had escalated to the point where individuals were being sought for extermination. I, of course, was on at least 3 sets most wanted lists. Walls told a story. In fact, enemies sprayed my name on walls and death threats more than I did to advertise. Wearing my fresh Pendleton shirt, beige khakis, and biscuits, old men comfort shoes, the first shoe officially dubbed the Crip shoe. He talking about some O-Dogs. I threw on my black bomber jacket and stepped out into the warm winter sun. I walked up 69th Street to Western Avenue and took a car at gunpoint. Still in a state of indecision, I drove toward the hospital. I intentionally drove through 60's hood. Actually, I was hoping to see one of them before I had made it through. And what luck did I have? There was bank robber, slipping hard on the street. I continued past him and turned at the next corner, parked and waited. He would walk right to me. Sitting in the car alone, waiting to push yet another enemy out of this existence, I reflected deeply about my place in this world, about things that were totally outside the grasp of my comprehension. Thoughts abounded I never knew I could conjure up. In retrospect, I can honestly say that in those moments before a bank robber got to the car, I felt free. Free, I guess, because I had made my decision about my future. "Hey," I called out to Robert, leaning over to the passenger side. "You got a light?" "Yeah," he replied, reaching into his pocket for a match or a lighter. I never found out which. I guess he felt insecure because he dipped his head down to the window level to see who was asking for a light. "Say your prayers, motherfucker." Before he could mount a response, I blasted him 3 times in the chest, started the car, and drove home to watch Benny Hill. Banging was my life. That was my decision. The next day I woke up feeling good. I got a call from China and we talked briefly about my decision. She had been totally bent out of shape by the fact that I had gotten a civilian pregnant. She felt disrespected, as she thought she was all I needed in a woman: lover, comrade, shooter, driver, etc. She didn't understand. I've always been intensely private, or at least I've always wanted a side of me to remain private. Being with Tamu in her world afforded me this opportunity. It was an escape to a peaceful enclave for a couple of hours. The places she took me, bangers didn't frequent. This was before the influx of narcotics, primarily crack. We were all of the same economic status, broke. Now, with so many ghetto-rich homeboys from every set, no places beyond the grass for gangbangers. I needed those escapes to maintain sanity. Often I felt that I was carrying the weight of the whole set on my shoulders. On a chilly October night in 1980, about 20 homeboys were assembled in front of the Blue Apartments on 18th Street when a 64 Chevy came barreling down the street with its occupants hanging out, holding guns, long-barrel shotguns. Instinctively, we took cover. Instead of shooting, they just hollered their sets. 60s disrespected ours and kept on going. Though I didn't know it at the time, simultaneously 4 blocks away on 84th Street, Twinkie and his girlfriend were arguing. April wanted to go home that night instead of spending the night again. Twinkie had no problem with that, but it was almost midnight. April insisted on being walked to the bus stop. Twinkie gave in, taking his .25 automatic along. They made their way to the nearest bus stop, at 83rd and Western. April lived on 62nd at Harvard and Blood Hood. Once at the bus stop, they stood and talked about different things concerning the set. April was China's road dog and a homegirl too. Suddenly, Twinkie spotted the Chevy, which we had identified as Pretty Blue's car. He pulled out his weapon to fire on the car, but April grabbed his hand, saying he should let them go on. They weren't bothering anybody, and that they probably hadn't even seen them. Twinkie put away his strap. Now, 3 minutes later, the 60s crept up from behind and fired 1 round from a long-barrel shotgun, striking Twinkie in the upper left side below the armpit, basically a heart shot. Twinkie, in shock, ran across the street and collapsed. The shooter sped away. Twinkie's mother and younger brother, Junior Ball, also a homeboy, were retrieved. It's been reported that in his last moments, Twinkie repeatedly said, "Mama, I'm gonna be good. I ain't gonna bang no more, Mama. I'm gonna be good." He died soon after with buckshot in his heart. Twinkie was 14 years old. At approximately 3 the next morning, I was awakened by a call from Twinkie's mother. I still did not know of his death. "Cody," she said with an icy voice unfamiliar to me, "they killed my baby last night. They killed my James last night." Then she started screaming frantically. "Who?" I managed to say through her screams. "The motherfucking 60s. Come over here right now, Cody, right now." I dressed quickly, strapped down and rode my bicycle 24 blocks to her house without so much as a care about security or the wind chill factor. I had not put Twinkie on the set, but I dug him. He was a stalwart soldier and would have been a ghetto star. On Thanksgiving 1979, he, another homeboy, Lil Doc, and I were walking down the street. I was strapped with a .22 revolver. Lil Doc had a .44. No sooner had I handed the gun to Twinkie than the police rolled up on him. Twinkie was captured with the strap. Doc and I ran. He had just gotten out of camp, and now he had been murdered. Grieving, I made my way up their drive and knocked at the door. It was opened by Junior Ball, with a fixed expression of grief and anxiety on his face. Stepping inside, I could feel the tension. In the living room, I saw 4 guns on the coffee table, 2 shotguns and 2 revolvers. I looked from the guns to Twinkie's mother, her face a mask of steel, eyes burning like hellfire. Doc came in after me. Once both of us were seated, Twinkie's mother got to her feet and walked around to us. "Those guns belong to James," she said, picking up one revolver and then the other. "He would want you to have them. He would also want you to use them. You were his homeboys, his friends. Because of this, I have called you two over here to tell you personally. I don't ever want to see you again if you can't kill the motherfuckers that killed my boy. You bring me newspapers. You make the news. But you better do something to avenge my son's death." I just sat and looked up at her in total admiration. Damn, she was down. "But first," she continued, "I want you two to come to April's house with me." She grabbed her car keys and we both followed her out to their car. Once inside the car, she explained that Junior Ball had been unnerved by Twinkie's death and had that night abdicted his oath to the hood. He could not be relied on for a retaliatory strike. In front of April's house, we sat momentarily. Then Twinkie's mother got out with a revolver. Standing wide-legged on April's grass, she opened fire, shooting 6 rounds into her house. I thought about doing likewise, but I felt she needed to do that alone. Back in the car, she said she honestly felt that April had set Twinkie up to be ambushed, and that, she added, we should cook April off the set. I told her I'd talk to China about it. Rumors about April's survival and Twinkie's death spread. Why hadn't April been shot? And why did she instruct him not to shoot? Rumors and ill feelings intensified when April went into hiding. Not long after that, she was specifically targeted and a hit was put on her. We made the 5 p.m. news the next day and the day after. On our third night, we found the 60s hood empty. Weaving our way through the streets, we found it hard to believe they had knuckled under. Not a soul was in sight. We drove down 3rd Avenue by 59th Street School, where they hung. Circled the school once, then pulled up, stopped, and sat idle, peering into the darkness of the schoolyard. The 60s had yet to procure a park and were using the 59th Street School as a meeting place. "Hit the corner one more time," Frog said from the passenger seat, a 357 sitting firmly in his lap. Lil GC sat on the edge behind me. He had a .22 Remington rifle with 18 shots. Starting off around 3rd Avenue again, we picked up a tail. Keeping my head straight, as so not to seem panicky in case it was the police, I surveyed the front grille and lights. No, it wasn't a police car. The police, at least the 77th Street Division in our hood, were driving furious. This car behind us was a Chevy, a 66 Impala. Keeping my head straight, I spoke softly to Frog. "Cuz, you know why we can't find them fools?" "Why?" Frog answered. "'Cause the motherfuckers is behind us." "Don't look back," Frog mumbled and adjusted his rearview mirror. "Just keep straight, keep straight. Now speed up a little and turn left on 5th Avenue. Frog was instructing me like a driving instructor. At the first driveway, bust a U-turn. Speeding up to 5th Avenue past 4th, I thought about the danger of clocking these cats 3 days in a row. Perhaps we had put too much on it. No doubt they were out on patrol and were possibly heavily armed in hopes of finding some intruders. Just our fucking luck. Frog was fresh out of prison and already on the campaign trail. He loved the set intensely. Turning left on 5th Avenue, I made another hard left into the first driveway. No sooner than I had backed out and come to a rolling stop at the corner of 59th and 5th than the other car slowly bent the corner in front of us. Had they been good military tacticians, they would have stopped in front of us and prevented our forward motion, while simultaneously having their shooters try to take out the driver to leave the occupants stranded and on foot to be hunted and killed. But no, this was not their tactic. They drove slowly around, came alongside us, but facing the opposite direction. As they inched closer and closer, I said to Frog, shoot these motherfuckers, man. Hold on, he said. Both of us were sitting still in the front seats like we didn't have a care in the world. A little more, a little... Boom, boom! Frog was leaning right over to me, shooting into their faces. Powder and cordite flew into my face from the gun cylinder. I heard from behind my head. Lil GC was shooting with the .22. Caught by surprise, their driver panicked, punched the accelerator and hit a light pole, which fell across the hood and roof of the car. We sped away down 5th Avenue to Slauson and made a right. When we got to 2nd Avenue, we turned back into their hood, heading toward our set. I saw 2 of their little homeboys on a bicycle and ran one over. Well, actually, not over, but I hit him and he flew a few yards, about 20. He didn't get up before we had gotten off the block. I felt nothing but a sense of duty. I had been to 5 funerals in the previous 2 years and had been stilled by seeing people whom I had laughed and joked with, played and eaten with, dead in the casket. Revenge was my every thought. Only when I put in work I could feel good that day. Otherwise, I couldn't sleep. Work does not always constitute shooting someone, though this is the ultimate. Everything from wall banging to spitting on someone to fighting, it's all work, and I was a hard worker.